Here's some things to keep in mind when watching No Country for Old Men from 2007. No Country for Old Men was the first Coen Brothers movie to win a Best Picture Oscar, and so far it's the only one of their pictures to have won that award. It's based on Cormac McCarthy's 2005 novel of the same title. And it represents something of a departure for the Coens because it is a film with a very dark tone. Nevertheless, it contains a number of typical touches that identify it as a Coen Brothers film. Some of these touches include the way in which it engages with a key genre of the classical Hollywood era, in this case the genre of the Western, which had been touched upon in several of their previous films, but really which comes front and center here in this film, which is basically a film absolutely filled with Western conventions and iconography, despite the fact that it's set in a relatively conventional period in 1980. The film is thus what's called a neo-Western, which is basically a film that pretty much obeys the conventions of the classical Western, but is set in the modern times instead of back in the times of the taming of the Wild West. It thus continues the Coens' interest in classic genres. It also, though, includes a number of comic moments amid graphic and bloody violence, which is something that you see fairly often in the Coen Brothers films. Keep an eye out, for example, for the very quick visual reference to the Mike Zoss pharmacy. If you don't get the reference, it's explained in the online write-up. But there are other genres that come into play in No Country for Old Men as well. For example, perhaps the most striking figure in the entire film is the character Anton Chigurh, for which Javier Bardem won a Best Supporting Actor Oscar for playing. Chigurh is virtually a figure from a slasher film. He's this huge, hulking killer who kills without any sense of remorse or emotion, and in some ways is reminiscent of slasher figures such as Michael Myers from the Halloween franchise. This is a film that features a number of other strong performances as well, and the Coens are well known for eliciting strong performances from their actors, largely because their screenplays are so good. Many actors have commented on how easy it is to work with the Coens because you know exactly what it is you need to be doing just from the screenplay. There's strong lead performances in this film by Josh Brolin and Tommy Lee Jones, for example, and a hilarious supporting performance by Scottish actress Kelly MacDonald, which again is a little out of place in this film, but that's exactly what you've come to expect from the Coens, is to have certain touches that seem a little bit out of kilter when, in comparison with the rest of the film. You also see Stephen Root, who appears in several Coen Brothers films, appearing in this film as the usual Coens regular. This is a film that's, except for Josh Brolin, who will later reappear in Hail Caesar, this is a film almost lacking in the usual cast of regular Coens actors, but you do see Stephen Root in a brief but memorable performance. You also see some very strong cinematography in this film by Roger Deakins, a British cinematographer who has shot most of the Coen Brothers films. And this, of course, is part of the contact with the Western genre in this film as well. The Western is very well known for its striking cinematography of Western landscapes, and you certainly get that here in this film. On the other hand, this is a film that revises and challenges many of the conventions of the Western. In particular, the Western is in some ways the most masculinist of genres in its classical form. And so you see lots of tropes of masculine power in the Western genre. But this is a film that undercuts many of those tropes. And when you do see figures of masculine power, such as Anton Chigurh, the film clearly questions whether that's a good thing. But the lead character in this film, Llewellyn Moss, played by Josh Brolin, is clearly not a conventional Western hero. And in many ways, he's placed throughout the film in sort of feminized positions. Here you see him in one particularly striking scene. Still has his cowboy boots on, but in general, not exactly quite the typical Western figure of the hero as you see him here. In addition to its dialogue with the traditions of the Western, this is a film that in fact interrogates a number of American myths. And of course, using the framework of the Western for this is absolutely appropriate because the Western itself is so much in touch with so much American mythology. Westerns typically feature a frontier that's there to be conquered by heroic white Americans, for example, even if they have to wrest it from the hands of savage enemies, which of course are typically Native Americans. In the world of McCarthy's Western fiction, though, a lot of this is typically revised. The expansion and the triumphs and the conquest of the frontier are all behind us, and we're left to contemplate the notion that we Americans are ourselves the only savages left that we have to deal with. There's also lots of echoes of the Vietnam War in this particular film, which remind us of the way that that war in particular challenges the notion of American victory culture. That is, this national narrative which suggests that our national identity is born in the quest to take on and defeat savage foes. Again, in the war in Vietnam, it became fairly clear in the course of the war that we were actually the bad guys. We were the savage people in that particular conflict, and that did a lot to shake the American national identity, I think. This is a film, and this is something that it derives from the novel as well. This is a film with a very apocalyptic tone. There's a kind of sense through this film that things are coming to an end. Very often in the Western, you get this sense of a young country that's just being formed and that has this bright future ahead of it. But now in this film, you get the sense that America's once glorious future might actually not be so glorious after all, and we might be looking for some hard times ahead. I'll leave it to you to decide whether or not you think this is something that turned out to be prescient in light of more recent events. But anyway, take a look at this film. It's a very serious, it's a very violent film. I'll warn you about that. But it is one of the Coen's most entertaining films in a lot of ways. And again, a film that won the Oscar for the Best Picture for the year that it was released. So it's a respected film that has a lot going for it as a work of cinematic art, as well as a film that has a lot of potential social and political implications.